Hi there, this is Matt Wakeling and you're listening to the Guitar Speak podcast. This is the show I produce in Sydney, Australia, where I get to sit down with leading guitarists and guitar figures from all around the world. This is episode number 113 and thank you so much for joining me. Now today I speak to the wonderful Australian musician Joe Matera, solo artist, singer, songwriter, great guitar player, has done plenty of sideman work as well, but for the last 10 years or so has been building his solo career, particularly in Australia and Europe, where he's built up a significant following. You might also know Joe's name as a rock journalist, having written for Rolling Stone, Australian Guitar, Guitar World, Total Guitar in the UK, and talking to some of the biggest names in the business. Gary Moore, John Mayer, Slash, you name it, he's probably talked to them over an amazing career. So it was great for me to actually sit down and turn the tables somewhat on Joe and find out all about his career. Let's jump in straight away. Here it is, my conversation with Joe Matera. Joe Matera, welcome to the Guitar Speak podcast.
Hey, hello, Matt. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great to have you. Now, you've had such an interesting and rich career as a guitarist, singer-songwriter, journalist, and a solo artist now. I'd love to dig back into all that stuff. And if we go back to the very start, what got you interested in guitar and place?
Well, music in general. My very early memory of music is when I was 4 years old, and I used to listen to a lot of radio. But I remember the first album that I asked my parents to buy me was the Beach Boys' Pet Sounds album. So that was 4 years old, and that's what I remember vividly. Wow. Walking to a shop and that album, I just used to listen to it. And look, my parents, being Italian, they used to also buy a lot of imported sort of top 40 vinyl records from Italy, and I would listen to all these sort of different, language, Italian language pop music and Australian stuff and whatever was on the radio. The radio was always on in my house, and so I had a love of music, and and from there obviously led me to playing the guitar. But my very first instrument, this is going to probably surprise you, was the piano accordion when I was about 7 years old.
Oh, awesome, man!
So it's a sort of a typical Italian instrument you pick up. But I had sort of tried to fiddle around, teach myself. I wasn't very successful with it, but I just like learning stuff by myself. And then I got a little sort of a drum kit, and I sort of banged away on it. But it wasn't until I was about 15 when I actually got a real guitar and then started learning on that.
Okay, very cool. That's a pretty good heritage, though. Beach Boys, plus your parents from Italy. So did they immigrate here?
Yes, they did. So they came out here a year before I was born. So I'm the first generation.
Oh, wow. There you go. So, that all ties in, the accordion.
Oh, absolutely. It does. And my love of, I like all styles of music. So that comes from that sort of background. It's not just rock. I've listened and I've played all sorts of styles of music. So that's all part of, I think, making you a well-rounded musician.
Sure. So when you get to the guitar at age 15, what kind of stuff are you listening to and aspiring to?
Yeah, I was listening to, basically, when I wanted to pick up the guitar, I was around about 10 years old, right? And I was watching Countdown, and I'll never forget the episode. So it was Hush, and they were playing, they had a big hit with Boney Maroney, and I remember seeing their performance. It was sort of out of this world, pyrotechnics and, Les Gock doing all sorts of stage moves. I thought, wow, that's pretty cool. So, I started taking more note of guitar players, but it wasn't until I was 15 that, I got my first guitar, and by then I was listening to, rock music, up at Star, the top 40 stuff, a lot of guitar stuff, I'm just trying to remember now, like listen to Blondie. So it's a sort of variety of music that was on the radio, and I was buying vinyl records, obviously, the Police and that sort of stuff. So, so when I got my guitar, which was a Les Paul copy, I remember, sort of a maroon colour guitar, and I just picked that up and got myself a little amp, and I just started. I bought a book called. Actually, I think I still got it here. I'm just going to pull it out. It is. It is called the Hal Leonard Unlimited Audio Visual Guitar Course. And I remember buying it's a book with a cassette and taught you how to read music and play some simple tunes of its day. And I went through the whole course and I taught myself reading music that way, for about 3 months. And then I just sort of started listening to vinyl records. And a friend of mine came around one night who was older than me, was playing in the band, and me just picking up guitar was very inquisitive about the whole process. So he sat me down and showed me a couple of bar chords and told me how important they were. And from that, I never looked back. I basically got myself a 100 songs to play, simple chords with, and I learnt myself that way. And then started slowing down the vinyl records and learned some solos, and here I am. That was my path to learning guitar. And I have to add also, I started buying Guitar World magazine. My very first issue, I remember, because I still got it, September 1981. So it was only, I think it was about like the 6th, 7th issue that came out.
Wow, cool.
And I read that whole magazine and I learned so much. So myself, education on guitar was from listening to vinyl records, trying to work out the solos, and reading all these guitar magazines, and they'll explain how things were played. And I mean, back then there was no tablature, so you had to do things by ear really, and just try and sort of work it all out. And I remember a section in Guitar World it was called Trading Licks, and all I remember is they would have like a guitar solo, and it was sort of written in standard notation, and I would try and sort of work it all out and listen to it, and that helped me. And then I think a few months later, Back in Black, the sheet music for that was the very first, I think, tablature music that came out, and I just saw it, and I thought, wow, and I bought it, and I thought, wow, this is a new system of learning guitar, and so that helped me a lot. But, tablature didn't take off till about 3-4 years later. By then I had already, learned a lot of my stuff. So that was my early days of playing guitar.
Very cool, very cool. So you're obviously very self-disciplined and developed your ear in getting across this stuff without a lot of aids, like all of us back then. No internet either. It's funny saying that these days, like for people of my generation, and I'm close to your age. I think I'm probably just a couple of years behind, but it's such a common story on this podcast too. So many players say, I worked it out by ear pre-internet, and for us it's normal, but for a younger generation it's very odd not just to bust out a YouTube clip or something. Oh
yeah, absolutely, yeah. And I mean, what's available today is incredible. I mean, you can learn so fast, but at the same time, I've checked some of those videos out, and the way that people play things, it's sometimes confusing. Like if you're learning the guitar for the first time and you watch a couple of these videos, you'll get a bit confused as to saying, well, who's playing it right? Well, I have a lot of guitar students, and they have trouble. They say to me, oh, we watched this video and he plays like this, and I look at what they've been shown, and I say to them, well, that's not the correct way to play it. I mean, he's probably hearing it that way. So it's good in one sense, but it's also bad because you're not relying on your own ear and your own confidence. I mean, that's what the whole thing is about, is building your confidence up. So, back then you didn't have any videos really that you could observe, or YouTube where you could check what you were doing. You just listened to it. So, and the only way then would be someone else, another fellow musician you jam with will play something. You go, oh, he's playing it how I do it, or you might play it slightly different, and you go, well, why are you playing it that way? But you play it and you go, well, it's the same notes, but you're playing it in this position, and that's how you sort of develop your own style. So, it's really good. Look, I've always appreciated having that sort of background, and I try and instill that in my own students. I say to them, look, trust your ear. Don't rely often on tablature. Don't rely on YouTube. Use it as a guide. Help you, but trust yourself.
Very cool. Yeah, it's a very good way forward, and you end up finding your own way into stuff as well, which I reckon is not such a bad way. So it's the early 80s. You've discovered the Back in Black book, which is pretty awesome. Yeah. Which is pretty great. Were you playing in bands, or when did
No, I didn't play in bands until a bit later. I didn't play in, my very first band was in the late 80s actually, so I was in already my 20s. So I was sort of very shy, and it was very hard in a small country town to actually know any other musicians that were interested in forming bands. So I just plodded along by myself until I'd moved out into a bigger sort of a a rural city. And that's when I started sort of meeting out and just sort of going, well, you know what, I've got to do this. I need to go out. So I met a couple of other musicians, and, you know, we just sort of jammed together and, you know, early band sort of stuff. And that's how it all happened. And from there, I just moved on forward. I was very ambitious back then, still am. And, you know, like sort of you outgrow certain bands. And, you know, I remember, you know, one of the early bands, the guys just didn't want to go any further than, you know, say within, say, 30 kilometres or whatever. And I go, well, I want to travel all around the place. You know, I want to do gigs wherever I can and pay my dues. So, you know, you sort of move on to another place. So, yeah, but, you know, that's what the situation was like back then too.
Sure. And whereabouts were you? Because I know you're in Victoria now.
I was in Kyabram. I was born and bred in Kyabram, and then later on I moved to Shepparton, and Shepparton had a pretty good music scene, so that's where I started all the bands.
So, Joe, the material you're doing then, are you writing your own stuff, or are you doing covers?
I wasn't really consciously sort of planning to do original stuff. I was writing, you know, like I remember my very first song. It was I was trying to write sort of, you know, like a little poem. It was very, you know, grade 6 style thing. But, you know, I did, you know, strum around and write, you know, words which I thought were lyrics. But I remember once I moved to Shepparton, I went to somebody was having like a songwriter course, you know, and at night. So I did a couple of those lessons. And what I found from that was one thing the guy said to me was, you know, like how songs are written with a verse, chorus, and he mentioned, well, you know, there's a certain formula, and I started questioning. I thought, well, you know, there's songs where there's no formula, like, you know, there's no verse really, there's no chorus, it's just the same line over and over again. So how can you say there's a formula? So then I thought, well, you know what, songwriting is really something that each person's, you know, approach is different. So yes, you know, there is how we have a verse and a chorus, and that's the sort of standard thing. But you can always go beyond that and say, well, you know, I want to write this sort of line and repeat it, you know. Classic example is, I'm trying to think, what's his name, Warren Zevon, you know, the Werewolves of London. I mean, if you listen to that song, it's the same chord progression over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And even though it's got you know, the chorus that goes, Werewolves of London, it's the same thing, you know, it's sort of the same melody. So it really breaks the whole sort of rule of, you know, come in with an intro, come in with a verse. I mean, look at the Beatles. They break their own rules, you know. I mean, She Loves
absolutely.
You, yeah, starts with a chorus. I mean, you're supposed to start with an intro and the verse, then you get the chorus, supposedly. But they, you know, they turned it all over. So, I mean, that was good. I learned a lot from that. But then I realised, well, you know what, I'm going to do my own songwriting. And then I would listen to a lot of songs and observe their structure and learn from that.
Great, man. Yeah, again, finding your own way through.
Yeah, I've been very individualistic in my approach. I think that's one of the things that why in my early years I went for a lot of different bands, because I was never one to sort of do exactly what, you know, like for example, say learn a guitar solo, and most musicians will learn it exactly note for note, which is great, you know, I love that, you know, but I would always add my little twist to it, you know, like obviously there's certain solos where you can't really change it because, you know, it would take away from the song itself, you know, iconic solos, you know, but 95% of the time I would play it, but I would play it my own little way, you know, add a little note here, miss a little note there, but it doesn't matter because it made my own way of approaching a solo. So I've always been in that sense very individualistic, and I think that, you know, that works for me, but sometimes doesn't work for others.
Sure. So did you end up did you end up doing any like formal kind of study in terms of music?
No, the only formal study I did was I did my own. I went. What's it called? The Australian Music Guild of Music. I bought these theory books and I went through the whole theory course. It was about 4 years, and I just sort of, you know, studied it myself and put myself through the exams, and I did I got it to grade 6 level, so I think I need another 2 more before I would have graduated with a diploma in music theory, but I just gave up in the end. I thought, well, you know, I've learned enough theory, I don't know really what I want to do with this, you know, it's useful, it helps me understand music, but you know, it's been very beneficial in my career, especially like, you know, with students, all that sort of stuff. But practical-wise, it doesn't make you a better musician at all. It just gives you knowledge to understand music. So if I'm working at a guitar solo by ear, knowing the theory of, say, okay, he's playing the key of A major, I quickly use my theory, and that helps me get to the, work at the solo a lot quicker than somebody who is just trying to sort of, work around, find the notes on the fretboard and whatever. It might take him, say, 2 hours, might take me 5 minutes because I already know the theory. I'm going, okay, A major, these are the notes in A major, can only be this. I know my pentatonic scales, blah, blah, blah. Sure. So it does help you in that sense, but that's the only type of formal education I've had,
Yeah. And from speaking to you, I gather you got what you needed out of it. It seemed like...
oh, absolutely, yeah.
It was more
absolutely.
of a functional than an academic goal.
Oh, yeah, love it. I still love it today, like even, if I'm working out something or even my songwriting, it comes in handy. So, I did get a lot from it.
Yeah, sure. It's interesting you mentioned Guitar World earlier because you've had a very full career as a journalist as well.
Yep.
How did that come about? Was that
it's actually interesting. It sort of just fell about. I've been on. Look, I'm very computer savvy, and I got my. I was on the internet from about 1994 in regards to being online sort of thing. So I was always inquisitive about guitar magazines and interviews, and I just fell into it basically. I think what it was I think I might have one of my early interviews was with some songwriter, and I started asking a few questions, and he was gracious in answering my questions. I thought this is really cool, I might try another one. So I went from there, and then eventually I landed in Australian Guitar magazine, one of my interviews, and from Australian Guitar I just got, this is good, and then the record company started hearing about what I did, and I started getting offered all these interviews, and it just went from there. And being ambitious, I thought, I've got Australian Guitar, it's about time I start aiming for the big market, like Guitar World, one magazine I've since, as I mentioned earlier, my very first guitar magazine. So and when I finally got articles in Guitar World, I was blown away by it. So that's how it all happened. Sort of fell into place, yeah. And I've always loved writing. I love writing, and just in general, really, whether it's just writing stories or interviews or songwriters like writing. So whether my strong points at school was the English language. So yeah, just fell into it.
That's excellent. I remember when you started writing for Australian Guitar, because I was buying that magazine. I was an avid guitar magazine buyer as well, and there's been some great writers who have gone through there. But I did that period when you came on board, and a few other guys. I think the magazine really picked up, and there was some great stuff. So.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah, it was a great period. Look, back then, it was some really great. I mean, I was really blown away by some of the other writers. These some of the guys that I would look up to as when I was reading the magazines as a younger person, and to be actually in the same magazine with them was just wow, it's just blows you away really. But it was great, and it really picked up the stand. I mean, I was always trying to get better and better what I did, but when it came to interviews, I always wanted to ask the questions that I would wanted to ask, or some other guitar player wanted to ask. I've had a lot of good feedback over the years from people who like yourself read those interviews. So I'm really sort of, for me it's like, well, that gives me much satisfaction that people have learned from it, because there's nothing worse than just asking a question that is meaningless and someone reads the interview and they don't get anything from it. I always wanted to make sure that the reader got something up from it and found out more about their favourite guitar player and how they did things.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. You also wrote for Rolling Stone as well. We should note, which is a great feather in your cap.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. That was great. I did a big story on Jeff Martin from the Tea Party. That was pretty much of an exclusive thing. So I was pretty wrapped in that to finally see my name in Rolling Stone. So. Yeah, and I did Total Guitar in the UK. I wrote songs I think it was about 5, 6, 7 years, I think it was something like that. But one of my biggest coup there was, remember the band, well, they're still around, Muse, and it was, I think it was 2004, and they were one of the hardest bands to get access to from a journalist, and I managed to get access to them. And I not only did I manage to get access to them, but I got a cover story, international cover story, and so they were on the cover. And I think one of my interview was one of the first that revealed so much about Matt Bellany's guitar rig. So I was pretty wrapped by that. I mean, and Metallica is another one. I did when Metallica were making the what is it? The I call it the Trash Can album. What was it? The in 2001 with Bob Rock. What was that one? Trying to remember now.
Saint Anger?
Yes, that one. Yes.
Yeah.
I got an exclusive with Bob Rock himself in the studio. This is like really in the early days, and it was an exclusive story. So Guitar World ran it. As coming up, Metallica got a new album in the can, and this is it. And to see it in the actual news page of Guitar World was like, wow, this is great. So I did a lot of stuff with Guitar World. I did a lot of Inquirer articles for them, which was pretty cool. Total Guitar did so many features. I think I did something like about 3-4 interviews per issue, which was a lot back then.
Yeah, definitely.
And Australian Guitar usually had about 2 or 3 interviews each issue. I also started working for like Classic Rock magazine, so that was sort of going outside of the guitar realm and into more of a generalisation of like rock music. But it was great fun, mate. It was lots of great memories there, lots of great people I've met. Some of them became great friends with me, which is cool, and many secrets revealed.
That's awesome. So you're freelancing though, doing all this stuff, I imagine.
Yeah, freelance. So basically, I just they would sort of employ me on the, as a writer, and get the interviews. And by then, because I had established myself, I didn't need to chase anything. I had record companies chasing me, really, which is really cool because that's the stage you want to get to. I mean, it took me a long time. I mean, it's a lonely life to be a writer because all you're doing is basically, interviewing, going home, transcribing it, writing it all out, sending it all out on deadline. You're on deadline all the time, And by the time you finish that article, you got another interview coming through. So I think at one point I was doing anywhere, about an interview per day for about 2 years. That's how busy it was. Wow. That's a lot of interviews, So. I remember one day I did 3 interviews in a day. It was like a phone call in the morning, early morning, about 5 a.m. With an artist from the States. Then I went into, I think, Sony Records in Melbourne for 11 o'clock interview, and then an afternoon one at Warner's, and then go back home and then basically, write it all up and transcribe it. So it's pretty busy.
That's full on, man. That's amazing. I was going to ask how you ended up accessing so many big names, but I guess, as you said, as you got established. Once you get established, and look, I started getting, the thing is you develop a rapport with these artists and trust, and once they see you're not going to go out and, I would never write up or reveal anything that was inappropriate or anything that wasn't supposed to be in the magazine, and I would respect that. And the artists what they do is they basically test you out. If you're going to be one of these writers who are going to just write anything for the sake of a headline, well, you're not going to, your chance of getting another interview is, basically nil, really. Yeah,
so, sure. I got stuff on tape that I would never let anybody listen to, but that's how you develop trust. So, guys like Slash, for example, stuff he told me, I would never reveal to anybody because it was in confidence and off the record. So I was privileged to a lot of stuff, but once you get established and, the record companies know you, they're always going to be chasing you. So, but it takes time. You can't just sort of go in there and thinking you're going to, get all these interviews. You just develop from that, really.
Sure. With this podcast, I've done about 100 or so interviews, which is just a fraction of all the stuff that you've done. And I only bring that up to say, I've met a bunch of people I've sort of discovered, but I've also met a lot of heroes from when I was growing up and working on stuff. And there's the old expression, never meet your heroes. Now, to be honest, I haven't met anyone in this context, and again, it's much smaller than yours, but I haven't met anyone that I didn't walk away thinking, wow, how great to meet them and to talk about their music, and they're just passionate about the guitar or music like me. They've just achieved some other standard. So I don't know. Have you got any Any thoughts on that mantra?
No, you're true. I've met a lot of my heroes too, and that is right. I used to always get nervous to meet my heroes because they're heroes, you know, and what they're going to be like. But I've never had any bad experiences. I mean, there's a couple of little, ones that I rather not mention.
Sure.
But they'll be revealed in a book, which I'll tell you about later anyway. So,
Okay.
yeah. So, but most of them been pretty cool, mate. You know, and look, the thing is about when you interview, and as you would know yourself with an artist, they're always going to be nicer to you because, you know, they're promoting a product. They're promoting their new album and stuff. So you know the ones. Look, I got to the stage where I knew the ones that were sort of basically doing a script, you know, and the ones that were really genuine with you, you know, like and so, you know, I would know straight away. Well, I know what you're just telling me what you want me to know, but I can figure this out. There's more to the story, and I would basically research it and find out. You know, that's the thing about doing journalism. You've got to be able to research, and I think what's lacking today's journalism is a lack of research or double checking the facts. You know, I would never put any interview out without double checking. You know, like once I've done the transcription, I would listen to it again. I would check the words, you know, and then I would check the information. I mean, sometimes artists have told me stuff that was completely wrong, you know, because just memory, you know, like they'll say something, I recorded this in 1975. Yeah. I would go back and go, you know, after I've done an interview, no, you haven't. This is recorded in 1978, for example. So I would fix it. You know, I never forget some of the artists would say to me, gee, you make me sound really, really intelligent. And I go, well, what did I do? And they said, just the way your interviews come across. Well, I say to them, well, you guys are really intelligent anyway. You talk to me. But they say, yeah, but usually how we speak isn't sometimes how it comes out in interviews. And what I would do is I'll just make it, you know, you got to fix the English language. You got to make sure that it's, you know, it reads well. You can't just write something like and because, you know, we all do that. Like I'm doing that now with you. But when you read an interview, I mean, it's the last thing you want to read is to go someone say, well, this book was and I wrote this and I mean, you'll get bored and you lose your reader. So I would clean that all up and just make it in a coherent sentence. And obviously that, you know, that helps them a lot too. So
yeah, sure. Yeah, it's funny. Some lazily edited interviews in any field, not just music, are always hard to read, aren't they?
Oh, they are, absolutely, yeah. And you know, you wonder sometimes, people use spell check, but I reckon sometimes spell check isn't right itself anyway, because I read some interviews sometimes going, what the hell is this? You know, like, that's not right, you know, or even they say something. I mean, if there's some word I wasn't sure of, I would research, and if I couldn't find that word, I would somehow try and find another way of finding what the person said. If I can't, I would just basically leave it out, because I thought, well, I don't know what he means by this, because sometimes I was using cassettes back then, you know, and sometimes you hear something and it doesn't sound right, and it could mean something totally different. So imagine if you wrote that and it came across as something totally different. So I was always very aware of and mindful of making sure I wrote and express exactly what the artist was trying to say and get across, rather than trying to think, I think he said this, I'll just put this in. You know?
Sure.
Because I've actually seen interviews where the writer, you can tell, has just stuck in a few words himself, and you go, well, I'm sure he didn't mean to say this.
Right, yeah. Are there any unusual or strange occurrences in interviewing? Anything you could share?
Let's have a look. Strange. Well, I can tell you some memories is or Nickelback. I was there. I was one of the very first journalists to interview Nickelback in 2001, before anybody actually. I mean, they were just starting to break. They weren't, you know, anything big. They did a gig at the Mercury Lounge in Melbourne, and so I interviewed them then. And about 6 weeks later, they were huge, you know. So they came back out again into Australia and did another tour, and I did I followed their career for about 4 years. I interviewed them each successive tour and each successive album, which is fantastic. And just watching them develop and how the audience grew was just amazing. John Mayer, I was the first journalist to do an interview with him for a UK magazine in Total Guitar.
Wow.
And I'll never forget the night my wife and I went to see him when he was first out in Australia. No one had heard of him. I had hardly had heard of him. He just had released Room Was it
Room for Squares.
Yeah, Room for Squares. Yeah, and so went to see him. The record companies, it was sort of meet and greet the journos.
Yeah.
There was about 10 of us. All right, that's all there was. No one was interested. Everyone was just off drinking. Their free beer and that sort of stuff. And my wife and I just watched him, and he was just, getting no attention. So he played all the songs from that album. And then the very last song was Lenny, a cover of Stevie Ray Vaughan's track.
Ah, yeah.
And that was a moment, it changed. All of a sudden, all the journos came out from where they were and they just watched him. And he performed that. And I knew straight away then this guy is going to be like massive. And that got their attention, and it just changed the whole vibe. And then, about 6 months later, he was breaking everywhere, like he was massive. So I did every interview with him up to about 2006, and he remembered me. He was really cool, and he would basically tell me, and he would always enjoy talking to me about guitars. He said, you come across as being very passionate about guitar playing. I said, oh, I am, and he said, I really enjoy talking to you. So he would always make an effort when he came to Australia to tell a record company, I want to talk to Joe Matera. So it was like, how can you say? It was an honour, really, to be actually, have such a great relationship with him. So they're two of my main sort of memories from it. Anything weird? I've got to go from my memory. There's so much happened. Might have to go back to a bit later, Matt. I think.
Yeah, that's fine. I guess I just mean memorable. That's probably a better word that I should have used. But yeah, that's awesome, man. I remember when Maya first came out because he was on one of the, I reckon it's about the same tour you're talking about.
Yeah, yeah.
He was doing like a morning TV show.
That's right, yep.
Might have been Carrie Ann Kennelly or something like that.
Yeah.
And it was him and his bass player, who was a long-term band guy. I can't remember the name, but and he was just on acoustic. And I wrote his name down. I never do this at all. But I thought, man, this guy's amazing. Who is this? John Mayer. I wrote it down, bought the album, and then it just broke. Which you were on the edge of. So that's very exciting.
Yeah. So that was really great. I have to mention one of probably the most biggest interviews and most important interviews I ever did was with Sir George Martin, the great fifth
wow,
Beatle.
Man, I had no idea
Now,
you did that.
That was, I've got photos with him, and I'll tell you that is some memorable interview because I remember, first of all, they put out a word about people that are interested in interviews, and I thought, I'll do this, I'll put my name forward, that sort of stuff. And then they basically, I think, shortlisted down to about 40 journalists, and then from that 40 journalists, they basically shortlisted down to about 10, I think it was. Mm-hmm. And I'll never forget this email from his publicist saying, George Martin has picked you to interview him. And I go, what the hell?
Wow.
So be there in about a week at the Windsor. It was at the Windsor Hotel in Melbourne. And I was going, wow, what do I ask a man who's probably been asked every single question known about the Beatles? So I spent a whole week researching on my little computer I had. I had like one of those early model computers, and I tried to come up with any questions that I could that were totally different to had never been asked before. I did. I eventually came through with a lot of great questions. I hope they were great anyway, but I remember the day came and I was, ushered into his room. I was so nervous because, this is rock royalty here.
Yeah.
And he was so accommodating. I met his wife, Lady Martin, and we sat down and, he just started opening up to me and, he told me things about about John Lennon and about the recording the White Album and just really great stories, And one of the things I remember was I asked him, who was your favourite guitar player? And he said to me, Jeff Beck. Now, how's that? He picked Jeff Beck, and I thought, wow, So that's one of the things I remember from the interview, and it was great. It was absolutely fantastic to get an insight into that world. Considering I was, sort of my previous generation, but to interview someone from that period is just enormous. So that's one of my probably most memorable interviews I ever did.
Man, that's brilliant. That's so good. Now, you're still writing now, but probably around, 2010, 2011, it seemed like that phase of your life slowed down as your own career, your own solo career, became more prominent. Was that a conscious decision to veer that
Yeah,
way?
look, I don't actually write anymore. I mean, I do the occasional article. I still, but what I do now is I just pick and choose what I want. That's more of interest to me. My main focus now is my own solo career. But yeah, look, I went solo. What happened there was I released a instrumental track called Face Off, and what happened was I released that, and that had my friend Tony Dolan from the metal band Venom Inc. Playing on bass on that one. And anyway, so what happened was I got this email from this guy in Austria who ran a record label, and he said to me, "Oh, I want to buy this track." And I go, "Oh, okay." So he bought the track, and he said to me, "Oh, I'm a big fan of Tony's work, but I really love your stuff. Have you got any other material?" And I go, I thought, "Oh yeah, I'm working on a couple other tracks." He said, "Can I hear them?" I go, "Okay." So I sent him a few tracks, and he goes, "Man, this is really good. How would you like me to release it?" And I thought, "Release what?" He goes, "Oh, release. I got this record label." So me always, trying to think, well, what's going on here? Guy have a record label. So I sussed him out, and that's I found out he actually had been around for about by then was about 15 years, releasing stuff in Europe. Just a small label, a lot of metal stuff. And I said to him, "Well, I'm not really metal." And he says, "Yeah, but I'm trying to branch out into rock stuff, and your rock instrumentals are really cool. So can you put together an EP and I'll release it as your first release?" So that's what happened, And then from that, it led me to my next album, which I wrote a song called Fallen Angel. It was my very first vocal song I recorded. I actually, in my previous bands, I used to always maybe do occasional song I would sing, but I was totally shy, and I would always hide behind my guitar, and that's why, lead guitar and rhythm guitar was what I sort of excelled at. But everyone used to say to me, my wife was the one that kept pushing me on this, she said, "You need to sing more," right? So I thought, you know what, I've got this song I wrote, which I wrote in 15 minutes, by the way, one of those sort of magical moments where you go, how did this song happen? And so I recorded that, put that on the album, and that basically opened up doors for me all over Europe because it got played on BBC and all sorts of places. So I ended up going on my first European tour. And since then, I've never looked back. I've gone to Europe now 6 times, and I've released, 4 albums and 2 EPs. So I'm about to release my 7th. So there's a lot of recordings, and it's all vocal material now. So I've left all the instrumental stuff behind. But yeah, that's what happened. That's the phase of my life where I went from being behind the pen to being in front of the pen, they say.
Yeah. Very cool. Now that label in Europe, is that WAR?
That's right, WAR Productions
so
in Austria.
That same label all the way through. That's awesome.
Yeah. So, I've been with them up to 2015, and then 2016 I signed with a new label. And what happened? That's an interesting story in itself. So I was with I was on my tour, the Louder Than Words tour in 2015, and I was on this radio show in Netherlands, and I did a live performance of a couple of my songs, and then later on I get this email from this record label there, and the guy says, "I just heard you play on the radio. I really love your stuff, and anything else that you've got that's new." He says, "I wouldn't mind signing you to my label." And I'm going, wow. So in the end, I signed with him, and the first release was what he wanted to do was to introduce me to a wider audience. Do a compilation album. So it was like the best of Joe Matera up to that time. So he released that, and then I basically released a new EP in 2017 through them called Heart of Stone. And and since then I've been with that label, and I also do my releases in Australia are through my own label, but overseas they're through VP Records.
That's great, man. That's so good. So you've mentioned you've toured Europe 6 times. I think the most recent was only a couple of months ago.
Yeah, that's right.
Awesome. Are you using musicians over there, or are you doing solo shows? How do you?
Well, on my very first tour in 2012, I did use musicians, just like an English band, but it didn't work out. I found that it's too much hassle, mate, too much drama. So in the end, I decided to just do everything solo. So basically now I'll go over just with my acoustic guitar, and I just perform like I do locally, just sing my songs, because all my songs have always been written on acoustic guitar. I've never written anything on electric guitar. Even my instrumentals by, people, surprise people to hear that, and they go, really?
Yeah, wow.
And I go, well, because so the thing with acoustic guitar is I can take it anywhere, I can play it anywhere. I don't need to sort of plug in, and I've never been one to sort of, just plug in my guitar and play it loud for the sake of playing loud. I mean, I know when you're young you do that, but I like something that's more convenient. I take my acoustic guitar and it's portable, so I write everything on that, and if I write everything on my acoustic guitar, it's going to stand by itself. So that's why I can go out and play my songs, and they stand on their own without a band. So yeah, I haven't used a band since 2012, but this new recording I've got coming out next month, I did this whole new recording in Sweden, and it's the first time I've used like a backing band, sort of just to give the song a bit more of a different take on things. So I used two local Swedish musicians who are good friends of mine. So they play on it, and yeah, that's where I'm at the moment. But when I tour, it's always by myself. I just sort of do solo shows or do a lot of festivals where I'm, on the same lineup with some other musicians too.
Yeah, that's great. Well, interesting you say about doing the solo thing, because your most recent EP, Waiting for the Sun,
yep,
is an all-acoustic EP, and the
that's
songs
right, yep,
definitely stand very strongly by themselves. So,
thank you. Yeah. That album's that got me. That EP got me the best reviews of my career. I mean, I got a review in Goldmine magazine in the US, and it just blew me away. So it got me a lot of work, and it got me noticed even further. So and that's. Anyone who listens to that EP will hear exactly what I'm like live, because I wanted to make an EP where when people hear it and they come and see me, they know it's exactly the same thing. Because, the thing in the past was, because I had bands play on the recordings, so when people come and see me, they would think, well, where's the band? There's only you on your guitar. So I thought, well, I want to represent myself in the way that I am now, and that's done a great job. So I'll do the same thing with all my future releases too. But never say never, mate. You never know what happens. In the future, I could decide to be part of a band, which you're probably going to ask me the next question about that one.
A little bit, yeah. Well, with the new record, so as you said, you recorded in Sweden.
Yep.
When does that come out?
September. So next month. I'm just finalising everything now.
Yep. And that was my next question. Are you gonna? What's your plans to launch it? Will there be, being more of a band album? Will that be part of the promotion?
No, it's just gonna be a single. So it's called Overload. So it's basically it's going to it's going to be a digital release, obviously, and go to radio. As for performing, I'm basically going to be performing it live, just acoustically. Won't need a band, because it stands on itself. When you hear it, you'll hear what I mean by it. I mean, the bass and the drums really give it a great rock feel, and it's perfect for radio and that sort of stuff, and give something different to the people. But you take away the bass and the drums, and the song's still there anyway. So that's how it's going to be with that one. But yeah, and look, when I was in Sweden, last time I was in Sweden was in 2017, and I went on my tour there. On one of the festivals I did, there was a band there called Rough Rockers, and got to know the guy, the promoter, who was the main member of the band, and he asked me to come up on stage and play a song with him, so I did. And then basically, it went really well, and I haven't felt like that in a long time, sort of stuff, to be part of a band. So basically, they asked me to play on a track they were recording, so I did that. And then from that, it led me to, they asked me if I wanted to join a band, and I said, at the outset, I said, I don't want to join any new band. I'm done with bands. I'm happy with a solo career. But they persisted, and eventually, about 3 or 4 months later, I agreed, on the condition that I could still have a solo career and just have the band as another outlet for me with my electric stuff. So,
okay, yeah.
So we recorded an EP together. It's called Smoke and Mirrors. I co-wrote the song with the lead singer and my wife, and that came out in April this year, and so I went off to Sweden and made a tour it. But unfortunately, sometimes life deals you things that you really don't know sometimes. So I went there, and my partner in the band, and just when things are taken off, he's unfortunately passed away now. So So that's now no longer a viable option now. So the band's basically done.
Sure.
Because he was the main man and basically was my partner. So, but we've got this great release that's, we released it on red vinyl through a Dutch label, and it's already sold pretty good copies actually. And we've got Graham Bonnet from Alcatraz and Rainbow. He sings on one of the tracks, and it's absolutely amazing. So if you like. So the vinyl and the CD, they're two different versions of the same release. So the vinyl has got the Graham Bonnet track on red vinyl, and the CD's got a bonus track where I sing one of the songs, okay? And so half the release is very rock-based, which is sort of, when you listen to it, people have said to me, it just sounds like a Joe Matera release, from my band stuff. But when they listen to the other side, it's very much more metal-oriented, because the lead guitarist is very much from the metal school, so I just play rhythm guitar on that one. But it's a great, recording, and so if people like, really good hard rock and some metal, they need to check it out. So Smoke and Mirrors. Nice,
very cool. So Joe, what's the best way for people to keep up with your stuff? So obviously your solo career and your other projects.
Basically, Facebook is what I use regularly every day. I'm basically on there every day, and that's where I use my main communication. And they can send me a friend request, and it's a personal page, but I use it more for my career because it just gives me more control over, people. And also my website, joematera.com. You can, sort of find out more about me there. And look, basically, if you put my name in Google, I come up first anyway, so it's not like you can't find me. Because a lot of what's happened is over the years, because of all my interviews I did, you put my name in there. I mean, I've found stuff in there I can't remember I ever done, and I look at it and I go, yeah, I do remember this now. But the internet's great for that sort of stuff.
Very cool.
So and there's even like stuff that my fans have sort of shown me that I'll go, oh, I can't remember that. Like really, and they've got stuff that I haven't even got, which is cool.
Nice, man. Very cool. One last question. You mentioned earlier about a book. Is that something?
Yeah. Look, it's early days at the moment, but I am writing a book. The proposed idea is to release this book in future sometime. But it's just about my experiences with being a journalist, and there's some great stories, like meeting Lenny, Motorhead, and the backstage stories. So it's going to be an insight into the backstage area, what happened, and what it was like to meet these guys, and the stories they told me. And so I've had a couple of publishers approach me with this sort of idea, and I think, well, it's something it's great to do. I like to share my stories with others, and if people who've enjoyed my interviews might get a kick out of sort of this stuff. So I'm just sort of slowly writing this book. So it'll be in the future sometime. So it's early days at the moment, but you're the first to hear about this anyway.
Oh, excellent, man. That's so good. Well, I'll be first in line as well to buy a copy because I've loved your writing and now discovering your music career as well. So, man.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
No, of course. Joe, thank you so much for joining us. It's been fascinating.
It's a pleasure, mate. Thank you for interest, and hopefully I haven't bored people today with my stories. Hopefully they get something from it, and and look, everybody who is welcome to sort of contact me, want to ask questions. Look, I'm always open to. I love getting questions from. I've had a couple over the years, some people who write to me and say, so and so used this guitar. Since you interviewed him, do you know if he, was this used on this album? And if I remember, if I got the information, I'm always happy to answer that sort of people. So I'm very accessible. So, but anything, mate. Hopefully they can check out my music and like it. And like I said, the earlier stuff's very. If you love Joe Satriani meets Gary Moore, well, my earlier stuff is very much along that vein. I've even got like Rick Brewster from the Angels. He plays on about 3 tracks.
Nice.
But my latest stuff is very much sort of, if you like Bryan Adams meets, Bryan Adams meets Neil Young, you're going to love what I do then because it's that sort of style.
Excellent. Sounds good. So I'll put all the links you mentioned, I'll pop them on our episode page too. But if you Google Joe Matera, you're going to find Joe right there. So excellent. So mate, thanks again, and
thank you so much.
All the best for the rest of 2019 and beyond.
Okay, thank you so much. All the best with your podcast, mate, and thank you to you and all your listeners out there.
All right, there you go. My conversation with Joe Matera. I tell you, I love bringing these conversations to the podcast with people who are so passionate about their field and have such a wealth of experience. So hope you really enjoyed that one. Please head over to joematera.com to check out Joe's music, tour links, and plenty more good stuff. Also, while you're on the webs, why not head over to guitarspeakpodcast.com, where you can check out all of our previous episodes, links to our social media, how to subscribe to the podcast, how to buy a t-shirt, how to get in touch and say hello. Very cool. All right, I'm out here. My name's Matt Wakeling. You've been listening to the Guitar Speak podcast. Thanks for joining me, and I'll catch you next time. Bye now.